Once I sang a song to the sea, and it sang the song right back to me. It sang, Baby Shark, Baby Shark. My dog literally just jumped off my lap and ran away. I'm just singing, dude. Really? It's a song. That scared you? Stop. It's not that bad. Anyway, what's up, everybody? Welcome to the JohnFilax channel. Who am I? I'm a overweight, blowhard, high school dropout who learned about the Constitution way back in the day and realized that everything on the news and everything the government does is a lie and unconstitutional. Well, I ran across this video today, which kind of explains how America's been turned into an unconstitutional police state bureaucracy. We are not the America that is printed on the Constitution. We are quite the opposite of that. We're more like a dictatorship from somewhere else. Anyway, this is a long video. This is the Spectacles channel. Please subscribe to him and tell him I sent you. If you like educational stuff like this, like I do, this is an amazing video. This guy made all these 3D printed parts to tell this story. He's worked a ton to make this video. So please give him a shout out. Tell him I sent you. And let's get into this. It starts out with the ballroom that Trump is building. But then it goes through the history of how the White House became the White House and how America has turned into a police state. Let's check it out.
This is the ballroom Donald Trump plans to build at the White House. If completed, it'll be the largest addition to the building ever. Ironically, though, it would bring the White House closer to the original 1790 plans. They were massive. 3 towering stories, a main building over 700 feet long, a dome to rival the Capitol's, and 4 separate wings to accommodate an enormous court. But there was a problem with all of this. You see, the architect...
I wonder if that would be big enough for Donald Trump's micropenis.
Was French. His inspirations were French palaces, like Versailles. George Washington did not want to look like a king.
And for all you Trump lovers, I haven't liked any president or voted for one of the two parties since 2004. I have voted third party since at least 2004. So at least for 20 years, I realized these parties do not represent us, and I stopped voting for them. And I've been begging Americans to stop voting for these 2 criminal parties ever since.
So he fired that architect. The new plan was designed by an Irishman, James Hoban. Though still grand, Hoban's design was 1/5 the size of the originals, with 2 stories instead of 3, a single rectangular building rather than a massive complex, and known thereafter not as a palace, but merely as the White House. This pivot matched Washington's and the Constitution's restrained vision for the presidency, an office of equal or lesser power than Congress. But since then, the world has changed. So has the presidency, and so has the White House. Over the last 200 years, the building has exploded in size alongside the presidency, a physical manifestation of an increasingly imperial executive with ever more power. Donald Trump's ballroom is hardly the first step in this direction, and it wouldn't have been possible without a few key presidents who, in the midst of crisis, stretched presidential power and the White House to their limits.
So every time there's a crisis, they extend their power. So that's when they decided, hey, every time there's a emergency, we get to expand our powers. So that gives them motive to create intentional emergencies, aka false flags, aka you'll see later in this video.
This is the story of how the White House got so massive.
Subscribe to Spectacles, everybody.
For a long time after it was built, the White House didn't grow. Washington's presidency remained the gold standard. 2 terms, a limited exercise of power, and a harmonious equal relationship with Congress. There was no need for a bigger executive residence. Instead, in 1848, construction began on the Washington Monument, dedicated to the memory of the first president's restraint. But then, something happened. In 1861, civil war broke out. Construction on the monument froze, and fittingly, Abraham Lincoln abandoned Washington's model for the presidency, instead seizing enormous new powers. Among his most ambitious acts was the Emancipation Proclamation, which freed all slaves in rebel states. This was almost unquestionably illegal, but Lincoln argued that because he was charged by the Constitution to take care to implement the laws, in a time of war, he was obliged to do whatever necessary to preserve.
So there you go. A lot of people love Lincoln and think he freed the slaves, but he didn't act as a constitutional president, and a lot of the stuff he did was wrong. A lot of the stuff you hear about previous presidents is propaganda, people. These guys are power-hungry people. They're not, think about it. Think about you, just you. You're an honest person in general. But if you walked by a suitcase filled with $1 million or a bag filled with $1 million in the middle of an alley, are you doing the right thing? Or are you going to turn into what most of us turn into? Oh my God, this could change my life. Now I have a big decision to make. Think about that, people. We need to be restricted. We need to be restricted or people are going to keep reaching for power.
Ultimate laws, the Constitution and the Union it formed. Washington couldn't have dreamed of doing anything like this, not just because he himself enslaved people. This was a shockingly expansive concept of presidential authority because it implied the right to fully ignore Congress and the courts in a time of emergency, threatening the essence of the Constitution's checks and balances. Yet the White...
And that's why we're at perpetual war for decades upon decades upon decades now. That's why they always want to be at war. Get it?
House didn't grow, and after the war, the Washington Monument was completed, and the White House returned to a co-equal position beside Congress. Because the Civil War was a genuine emergency, and because Lincoln didn't actually expand presidential power. Instead, he expanded his apparent authority, the limits on how he exercised power. The Emancipation Proclamation, for example, was a military directive. But when the war ended and the soldiers went home, the president no longer had any serious power. Congress amended the Constitution to truly abolish slavery. Congress held the purse, and without a standing army or large bureaucracy, even if the president had the authority to override Congress, he had no practical power to do so. But Lincoln provided a blueprint. The question now was, what if presidential power does grow? What if the president does get a standing military and a large bureaucracy? And what if a future president with far greater power than Lincoln made the same argument? Could it be temporary, or would it unleash something unstoppable?
The latter, obviously.
By the turn of the century, that power did begin to grow, because America was then in the midst of another crisis. The Industrial Revolution had arrived, and its costs became apparent. Deforestation and environmental collapse, poisonous foods, and unimaginable poverty. Teddy Roosevelt knew that the presidency was too weak to meet these new challenges. Congress could draft endless laws on food safety and labor rights, but without a strong presidency to enforce them, none of it would be worth the paper it was written on. So Roosevelt and Congress created numerous executive agencies, including the U.S. Forest Service, the Food and Drug Administration, and the Department of Labor, among others.
And here's where all these unconstitutional bureaucracies start to gain power. And this is where the American people drop the ball because they don't pay attention to this stuff. Just like today, most people are worried about football, baseball, basketball, watching porn, playing video games, smoking weed, And this is what they do behind your back. And then you turn around one day and there's a robot police dog in your neighborhood doing patrol and you're scared to come out your house. I know I'm being extreme, but they don't build all this stuff for no reason. They want to use this stuff, and they need people to use it against.
But he needed more than agencies. Roosevelt needed the West Wing. Approved and funded by Congress, this was an office building for Roosevelt's growing cabinet, a necessity for managing this ballooning bureaucracy. At the same time, America embarked on wars of conquest in Cuba, the Philippines, and elsewhere, producing a larger, more professional standing military and the National Guard. Presidential power was growing, and so was the White House. Have you ever been somewhere?
Standing army? Anyone ever heard standing army?
At the airport, in a coffee shop, or just away from home, and been sidelined by that sinking feeling that you forgot to do something on your computer or left a crucial file on your desktop? Any desk can help. It's a files or desktop. FDR called his passion. Now, 1929, another crisis. Any desk. So industrialization happens, and presidential power grows as a way of coping, giving us the West Wing. In 1929, another crisis struck.
After the most spectacular rise in its history, the stock market crashes.
The Great Depression. Now things accelerate. In 1932, Teddy's distant cousin Franklin Delano Roosevelt was elected on a platform of sweeping change to avoid similar future disasters. FDR called his program the New Deal, and it involved providing for the elderly who couldn't work, eliminating child labor, and preventing the super rich from abusing the public and breaking the economy. Implementing it.
So he implemented a whole bunch of unconstitutional things. Here we go. Now this is where it just starts stacking. And Americans are asleep at the switch here, asleep at the wheel.
Required more power, new agencies. So he and Congress created the Social Security Administration, the Securities Exchange Commission, and National Labor Relations Board, among many others. Teddy's West Wing wasn't up to it. So in 1934, with congressional funds and approval, FDR nearly tripled the size of the building, adding a second floor and digging out a basement. Then, another crisis.
December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy.
In 1941,
by the way, everybody, the U.S. was warned that Japan was coming to attack Pearl Harbor, and they ignored it. I don't care if you believe me or not. Look it up for yourself. I've studied so much World War II history. Even in Europe, the French were tipped off that the Germans were stuck in the mud in the forest. What the hell's the name of that forest? I forget the name of the forest, but they decided to cut through a forest. They got stuck in the mud. The French were informed ahead of time. And just like in Pearl Harbor, they were told, you guys are crazy. They would never go through the Ardennes forest. The Japanese would never cross the Pacific and attack the Pearl Harbor. You guys must be seeing things. Both of these happened in World War II.
Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor, pulling America into World War II. Suddenly, FDR found himself at the head of the largest military America had ever seen, in a bigger fight than we'd ever been in. He was truly indispensable, and a new fear was born. What if the Axis bombed D.C.? So FDR embarked on yet another congressionally funded expansion to the White House, the East Wing. From the outside, these appeared to be yet more offices, these for the First Lady and her staff. But a secret lay underground. The Presidential Emergency Operations Center, a bomb shelter and emergency war room. Under FDR, presidential power exploded, and the White House followed suit. And even though throughout this period, Congress was still in the loop, still holding the purse, all these new agencies posed a serious danger. If they were accountable only to the president, he could assert a power to legislate by fiat, simply directing the bureaucracy to do things, even if those demands contradicted Congress's.
Again, unconstitutional bureaucracies controlled by the president. You have no say in it. You didn't get to vote on it. These are all unelected. This is all illegitimate power. All of this is illegitimate power. And literally, Americans have the right to rise up and overturn and abolish this government. We literally have that right to do so.
Laws. Luckily, Congress made a number of agencies like the SEC and NLRB independent of the president. Still, the military was growing. Many agencies were in his grasp, and those that weren't were just out of reach. In 1945, the stress of all those new powers sent FDR to an early grave. In similar fashion, after 150 years of renovation and expansion, the White House, too, was on the verge of literal physical collapse. Under Roosevelt's successor, Harry Truman, an architectural investigation warned the building was still standing, quote, purely from habit. In response,
that's pretty funny.
Many sought a complete rebuild, this time from marble instead of limestone and wood. But clearly that didn't happen. The White House we have today looks just as it did when FDR died. Because instead of a gaudy rebuild, in 1949, President Truman had the entire interior gutted and rebuilt exactly as before, now hung on an invisible steel skeleton hidden between the walls.
See, that takes a lot of class to do that. You think Donald Trump could actually say, no, I want to keep the White House the way it is, just gut it on the inside and make it look exactly like it did before? No. He's got to turn the White House into a giant gold toilet.
Presidency, too, was now in need of secretive support structures. So Congress and Truman created new agencies. The Department of Defense to coordinate a new massive standing military, the Central Intelligence Agency to conduct espionage operations, and a National Security Agency to secure vital communications from foreign.
And meanwhile, all these agencies, and I tell this to people all the time, anything they're willing to do to someone else, illegals, other countries, torture, they're also willing to do that to you, people. That's why you have to protect people you don't like. That's why all human life is equal. If you look at other people and other nations as less than you, you're saying that our government can go over there and end their life on a whim because of our ignorant perception of people being less than us. And they are using these agencies against us. The NSA, they're using against us. They were caught how many times? It's just an open secret now that everywhere you go and anywhere there's a phone or TV or anything at this point, you're being listened to. There's people behind the scenes that profit from all this stuff that want these technologies to be used against you. And they're doing it. Palantir, flock cameras, smart homes, 15-minute cities. A disgusting, brutal Israeli-trained police force. What do you think is going on here? This is no constitutional republic. The Constitution is a cuss word to a government official, except for a couple.
Interception. These are very different than either Roosevelt's agencies. They aren't about solving real problems at home. They're about protecting power, America's power on the world stage. That isn't necessarily an ignoble goal, but there's a problem here, and it didn't take Truman long to prove it.
The forces of the United Nations are in Korea to put down an aggression that threatens all human hopes of peace and justice.
Without congressional authorization, he went to war in Korea.
And there it is. And that's the start of every unconstitutional war ever since. We're not supposed to be at war, people. We're supposed to be a country of peace, the light of the world, the beacon of freedom. People are supposed to go, man, I wish our country ran like America does. No. Instead, our government is just like the police. The government reflects the police. Beat you down first, torture you, take over your land, your freedom, and then blame it on you. They're a direct reflection.
This is unprecedented. The Constitution is very clear. Congress authorizes declarations of war. The commander-in-chief of the military cannot also be in charge of deciding war and peace. But America, Truman argued, was already terminally at war with communism. This was FDR's East Wing bomb shelter at its worst. A sort of fear and paranoia of an increasingly shapeless enemy, an increasingly permanent sense of emergency in which any exercise of power could be justified. Yet Truman overplayed his hand. Congress constrained his war powers. And in 1952, when he sought to seize industrial facilities for military production, the Supreme Court blocked him. He stood down. In so doing, the court affirmed that those commander-in-chief powers had limits, yet they also established a blueprint to go further. They asserted the president had three kinds of power. Affirmative, when he acts in concert with Congress. Inherent, when he acts alone, yet may be checked by Congress. And plenary, when he has ultimate authority, which Congress...
Ultimate authority in one man to act on behalf of 330 million people. They've sold you out, people. People who still vote for these two parties, you might as well be a police supporter. That's the same people. They're still brainwashed. The police are the good guys. The government's there to help. Like, wake the F up, dude. Wake up. Plenary power. Plenary power. Kind of like the same thing they give to cops. They just call it discretion. Plenary power.
Cannot limit. Justice Jackson knew those plenary powers were exceptionally dangerous. In his words, "For what is at stake is the equilibrium established by our constitutional system." This is a vital turning point in American history. The presidency started as a limited office, respecting Washington's precedent, even after the interruption of the Civil War. But the Industrial Revolution, Great Depression, World Wars, and Cold War brought more permanent expansions of presidential authority, with the White House growing to match. Domestic administrative powers came first, then expanded, then foreign powers, war powers, then secret powers, all amidst an increasingly permanent sense of emergency. By Truman's time, the arsenal of presidential powers was truly enormous. Yet Congress and the Supreme Court maintained important boundaries, limiting the exercise of those massive powers. But the Lincoln-era fear, what if presidential power grew? What if, with those new powers in hand, a president then crossed the Rubicon like he did? Well, that fear was realer than ever. As Justice Jackson elaborated, as presidential power had grown, so had the stakes of constraining its use. If even an apparently minor power became regarded as plenary, it might derail the entire balance of power in government.
It already has.
One president was intent on expanding those plenary powers.
You and your forebears built our nation. Now, please help us rebuild it. And together,
See, this is where I get pissed off because all these Republicans, fake ass conservatives, these old boomers, they thought Reagan was the greatest. This is the first person I remember as a child as president because I was born in 76. So 1984, this guy got voted in. I think he was running against Walter Mondale or something. These are all puppets, man. You think any of these guys give a damn about constitutional rights? Do you? And the funny part is they've only gotten worse since this guy. This guy was bad, and they've gotten exponentially worse, more dictator-like, and more totalitarian as the decades have gone by. And Americans still fight over Republican and Democrat when both parties have brought us into this disgusting hellscape of a police state.
we'll make America great again.
Just after he was elected in 1980, Ronald Reagan embarked on a minor project at the White House. For the first time, he had the third floor furnished. Not a huge deal, except the project was funded by large donations from individuals and corporations, not Congress, which, as was its constitutional authority, typically held the purse strings for such projects. They'd had a long history of rejecting funds for presidential expansions, symbolically manifesting their very real authority over the office. But that was changing. The seeming smallness of the project belied monumental intentions. Reagan had campaigned on deregulation, shrinking the government, but he didn't have Congress on his side. So, in order to deregulate the large bureaucracy that had grown up since FDR, in 1980, Reagan's legal team put forward a novel legal argument, unitary executive theory. They asserted, not too differently than Lincoln did during the Civil War, that all executive power was vested by the Constitution in the president, and that it was all plenary. This meant Reagan was entitled to deregulate by firing and managing bureaucrats despite whatever objections Congress might have. Maybe that even feels pretty common sense. I mean, executive bureaucracy, head of the executive. But there are problems. First, Reagan begins attaching notes, called signing statements, to laws he doesn't like when he signs them, wherein he calls the laws unconstitutional and directs the bureaucracy not to enforce them.
Wow.
This is crazy because if when Congress passes a law, it's up to the president whether that law actually gets enforced, then what power does Congress even have?
Zero. Zero power.
But this theory goes further, implying that any agency or executive function not directly accountable to the president was unconstitutional. This meant, for example, the independence of agencies like the SEC or NLRB and laws establishing independent powers for the investigation of corruption were illegal. This is insane. If true, it would mean the president could simply fire anyone who investigated him or his administration for corruption, which is exactly what Reagan attempted to do in 1988. Luckily, the Supreme Court saw how insane this was, and they ruled 7-1 against Reagan, reversing his attempts. The lone dissenter was Antonin Scalia, who'd been appointed to the court by Reagan after helping formulate unitary executive theory. Reagan's disciples now had their mission. More plenary power required more ideologues like Scalia on the bench. The White House, like the presidency, had been growing. Only self-restraint had held various presidents back from taking full advantage of it. Reagan seized those powers while asserting his independence from Congress. There were still limits, but if a real crisis struck now, anything could happen.
The United States does have credible evidence that the White House and Air Force One were targets.
And there's your inside job. Fake false flag. So you can now bring in the ultimate police state. And a few young people are watching this. I doubt too many young people are watching this. But before 9/11, it was a different America. You still had like the illusion of freedom. After 9/11, it's like, nah. And they claim that they took all your freedoms away after 9/11 because the terrorists attacked us because we were free. They literally told people that we were attacked on 9/11 because they hate our freedom. So now we have to take all your freedom away, create a homeland security, and a bunch more unconstitutional police state bureaucracies. Right?
September 11th, 2001, it was believed terrorists attempted to fly a plane into the White House. The building was closed to the public for 2 years. Guardhouses cropped up all over the grounds. Nearby roads were closed. Classified air defense enhancements were installed. Snipers moved in on the roof. The presidency, of course, changed too. Bush revived Reagan's unitary executive theory and expanded it on account of the wartime circumstances. Like Lincoln, he argued he was compelled to do anything he judged necessary to preserve the Constitution, even if Congress disagreed. The nightmare scenario.
Even destroying the Constitution. They're allowed to do anything they want to uphold the Constitution, including destroy it and do a bunch of unconstitutional things. Like, what in the world, man? What is going on here? Dude, we are sitting ducks, people.
Scenario was now real. The power at Bush's disposal was unlike anything Lincoln could have imagined.
The only thing saving us is the fact that we are an armed nation. Don't ever in your life, ever give up your guns. Ever. That's the only thing keeping them from just completely taking over and making us chattel again.
Immediately, Bush ordered Truman's National Security Agency, originally tasked with protecting American communications from espionage, to instead spy on American communications without warrants. He reasserted the power to launch preemptive wars without congressional consent and to determine treatment of prisoners of war. Thereafter, those captured in his War on Terror were tortured brutally. When Congress passed laws to stop the torture, Bush utilized Reagan's signing statement strategy, simply signing the laws into force but attaching notes, saying he refused to enforce them because they would undercut his ability to preserve the Constitution. Under Reagan,
he refused to stop torturing torturing innocent people against every law in the world because it would keep him from upholding the Constitution. Talk about gaslighting. Talk about gaslighting, people.
The president effectively claimed the power to legislate without Congress. Under Bush, this power was taken to the absolute extreme. Since then, unlike Lincoln's expansions, the White House has remained a fortress, and the president's wartime powers have proven ominously permanent. In fact, they've only grown, as Obama continued Bush's practice of legislation via bureaucracy with programs like DACA and expanded presidential war powers in the Middle East. Then, there's Trump. This building is like Reagan's third-floor renovation on steroids. First of all, it's going to cost $250 million, without a single one being appropriated by Congress, the legislature's own plenary power.
So all the oligarchs, all the wealthy people who are running the country now gave him $250 billion to build this gaudy, this is the equivalent of a guy with a small pecker driving a giant pickup truck. It's the same thing. He's trying to overcompensate for something.
Taxing and spending has been critically compromised. Instead, the money is coming from corporations like Palantir and Google, either willingly donated or extracted by the president through lawsuits that, if brought by anyone else in American society, would have been thrown out in seconds.
A couple of you are sitting here saying, sir, would $25 billion be appropriate? I said, I'll take it. It doesn't take too many 25s to get it done.
Likewise, he's further expanded presidential war powers, bombing Iran without congressional authorization and sinking alleged drug boats.
And the sick part is people agree with him going to foreign countries, almost starting World War III, and bombing countries that have never done anything to us ever in defense of a foreign country. Trump is worried about that foreign country and its borders and its protection more than any of us. And we pay for it all, people. Stop voting for these two criminal parties. Wake up.
Caribbean. Moreover, he's done what Reagan failed to. Backed by a Scalia disciple majority Supreme Court, he's fired heads of independent agencies and inspectors general whose jobs were to investigate and prevent corruption. This is a vital move for him. Consider this. When Bulgaria gave George W. Bush a puppy in 2006, Bush turned the dog over to the National Archives because accepting gifts from foreign leaders is corrupt and illegal. Trump, on the other hand, intends to accept a jumbo jet from Qatar. That's right. The ballroom isn't just the single single largest and most expensive addition to the White House since it was built, a 90,000 square foot gilded symbol of presidential power and largesse. It also perfectly represents the corruption which comes as a result of that unchecked executive. Think back to the original Versailles-inspired plans for the White House. The ballroom's similarity isn't just about scale or aesthetic. Trump is building it the way Louis XIV built Versailles, extracting money and loyalty from wealthy courtiers, dispensing favors and tax cuts in return. In the process, ordinary Americans lose their power to check his ambitions and shape government policy. Think about the most important episodes of his second term so far. Doge, National Guard deployments in major cities, purges of top military officers, censorship of colleges and media companies, mass deportations to foreign concentration camps without due process, and rapid expansions to ICE, a faceless militarized police force accountable only to the president.
There's your modern American police state, everybody. We've dropped the ball, guys. All of us.
This is not about policy. This is about consolidating unprecedented and unchecked power in the presidency. They have literally said this out loud.
The president has plenary authority. Stephen?
Plenary.
Oh, you just realized what plenary means. That means the rest of us can go F ourselves and die. He's going to do what he wants. Think about that, people. Think about it. This the America you want to live in?
Power means uncheckable power, supreme authority, and that comes at a cost to your power, your rights, and your equality as a citizen. This imperial presidency has, as we've seen through these White House expansions, been the project of both Democrats and Republicans. Any ambitious president, and they are all ambitious, will seek more power. Their reasons are also not always bad. Teddy and Franklin Roosevelt needed the West Wing to regulate corporate abuse of our land and workers. Lincoln and FDR needed a powerful presidency to win existential wars against slavers and Nazis. Crises from time to time demand the energetic exercise of the executive office in the public interest. Yet it's crucial that in the wake of crisis, those new powers are checked and balanced by Congress. Under Reagan, that balancing act began to fall apart, and since Bush, it's all but totally collapsed. Trump and his ballroom revealed just how dangerous this consolidation of power in the executive has become and how much corruption it enables. But it doesn't have to be this way. Congress has reined in ambitious presidents in the past. Before Teddy's little West Wing, more ambitious presidents proposed quadrupling the size of the White House. Congress stopped them. When Richard Nixon abused secretive powers and attempted to meddle in American elections, Congress stepped in and inaugurated a rare period of congressional dominance in modern politics. Besides, God forbid, the military, an aggressive Congress is Trump's last potential obstacle to fully consolidating and removing limits on the vast arsenal of presidential power that was intentionally built to be limited and shared with the courts and Congress. It's why he's called on Republican states to gerrymander like hell to save him from midterm retaliation. Never be fooled into thinking votes don't matter. They terrify tyrants. It's why they rig elections. Voters must empower Congress and demand they check the presidency once more. The only question is, by the time we can, what of our Constitution will be left to save? We worked like hell on this video.
That's absolutely true, everybody. Please subscribe to Spectacles. Tell them I sent you. Give them a thumbs up. Tell them thanks for making this. And if anybody watches and they're mad at me because they love Trump so much, you're America's problem, dude. He's a reality show star who was best friends with Epstein. I mean, people, wake up. They're all bad. We had a chance in 2008 and 2012 to elect Ron Paul, an actual constitutionalist. He had more support from the military than all the other candidates combined. He was going to cut the deficit $1 trillion the first year. All these disgusting, power-hungry government parasites marginalized him. And the people that run the mainstream media back then, there wasn't enough internet like there is now, even though he did win all the internet debates too. This is what you get, folks. Standing armies walking the streets, masked, unidentifiable men with guns. Like, it's almost like they want a civil war so they can crack down even harder. I don't know, man. It's hard not to lose hope, and I don't want to sound like a doomer, but good Lord. If millions of us don't activate, millions of constitutionalists don't activate, it's over, man. It's over. You're going to live in this third world. You can't afford nothing. Shithole. Again, thanks to Spectacles for making this. Good job, dude. Everybody go subscribe. And thank you for watching if you've been here this long. If you're mad at me because Trump can do no wrong, no matter who he hangs out with, no matter, how many times he says Epstein's a terrific guy. If you still are angry, look in the mirror, dude. You have cognitive dissonance. Thanks for watching, everyone. Much love. Peace.